welcome to Driving Ambition.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really stoked that you could join me for this. I've been able to drive your beautiful cars for a little while now, and the chance to get to meet you is really awesome. So what I want to learn from you today is a whole lot of things about your career, because you're like the story of starting in an organisation and literally working yourself all the way up to the top. And it's a car organisation as well. So I'm sure along the way you've had a fair interest in cars and probably owned a fair few as well. So let's roll right back. Just before you were saying that you started with the BMW organisation. When was it? Way back in 2002?
2002.
Right.
Yeah, October 2002.
So how did that happen? And is that a role that you were targeting, or were you just the man on the spot?
In retrospect, it was to a certain degree dumb luck. I finished my MBA and we had our graduation ceremony about 2 weeks after 9/11. And so I was in Toronto at the time in Canada.
Yeah.
And like every MBA graduate, I was interested in investment banking or management consulting. But of course, those industries were absolutely dead at the time. And so it took me a long time actually to find a role. But I had grown up in Germany. I spoke German quite well. I had just finished my MBA, and so actually a friend of mine found this job posting with BMW Canada and sent it to me and said the line was something like, "It looks like this job description has been written for you."
It's nice to have friends like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's actually the only time that's ever happened, but it worked out.
But you only needed one.
That's right. Yeah. And then so I applied and ended up getting the job. It was for a trainee program at BMW Group Canada, and that's where it all started.
And is that where they take you across a lot of roles so you can see what you like?
Yeah, so it was, I think it was an 18-month program, and I spent my first year in Canada with 3 4-month stints in marketing, in sales, in dealer network development, and in finance. At the end of that, I spent 6 months in Munich doing a similar thing, going around to see a few different departments. Spent 2 weeks on the production line in Munich, installing steering columns in the E46 3 Series. And then ended up back in Canada and started off in product management.
So your career has had an interesting timing, because the X5, which is one of the biggest selling models globally, is 25 years old this year, isn't it? And we're in this 25th edition. So you started right around when that was a really new product.
It was still fairly new. The X5 was first introduced in 1999. There were maybe 1 or 2 other SUVs in the premium segment, and there was a lot of debate within the BMW group. This is before my time, so I heard this after the fact, but a lot of debate within the within the BMW group about whether or not we should enter into this kind of segment.
Well, you were the first luxury player into it, really, weren't you?
Yeah.
Right.
But a lot of debate as to whether or not a sports sedan company that's it's built its brand around that should take this risk of going into an SUV. And of course, it's turned out really well. Yeah, it's not been bad.
Yeah, I know that in New Zealand, I think it's been sold here for about 22 years, isn't it? Out of those, what is it? Been your top seller in 17 years?
Yeah.
Which is sensational.
Right.
Clearly, it's hit that market kind of demand. Hey, back to your experience in the graduate program, because this is something in New Zealand is obviously we don't have many large companies, so there's not a lot of companies that can really do that. You had a pretty amazing experience. When did you work out what was for you?
Going through the program, I realized that certain things were not for me. That was probably the most important thing.
What were you not?
I was not a finance guy.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, what I quickly learned was it's wonderful to work for a company where you can really be proud of and excited by the product. It quickly became clear that working as a product manager, as someone who can actually influence which products are brought to market, how they're offered, pricing strategies, all these things seemed to me sort of almost like the heart of BMW. And that's where I wanted to be.
Would you describe it as catering to people's need?
In some ways, yeah. Yeah.
But then you've got to push boundaries as well. You've got to show them things that they hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
Like the X5.
Yeah.
So
no, absolutely. I mean, we always look at cost, competition, and customer at the end of the day. It's all about customers' tastes, customers' preferences, And if you read things well, then you'll stumble upon a product like the X5, which quite a popular one.
Very good. So you went through this graduate program, and did you get straight into a product role after that?
I went straight into product management in Canada after that, and did that for a few years. Then ended up leading the team, and then did an equivalent role in Munich. So I went to Munich in 2008. We spent 3 years there. Learned what it's like working in product management at the FITS, the research and development center in Munich, which is quite a different scene.
So tell me, in an organization like BMW, it's a global organization, but based in Germany. What is business? What is the business language?
It depends where you are. Anywhere outside of Germany, it's typically English. But if you're an expat in Germany or in Munich, they have a rule. Basically, if 80% of the people in the room are native German speakers, then the meeting is in German.
Yeah.
And if you're in the minority, then
you deal.
Yeah, tough luck.
I'll tell you what, there's a lot of tools that have really changed that recently. In the last year, these live AI tools that can listen to a conversation in multiple languages and translate have become phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's
true.
Completely changed the way things work.
I'd love to see how those deal with a Bavarian accent, though.
Right. The Bavarians are known as the slightly more cruisy Germans, is that right?
Yeah, they
enjoy a long lunch.
They definitely enjoy a long lunch. Bavaria's, I think by the rest of Germany, Bavaria is often seen as, a state with a lot of farmers, sort of a bit of an alpine taste to it as well. Bavaria borders onto Austria and the Czech Republic.
Oh, right. Okay. Was this still with the BMW products? But because you've crossed into MINI at some stage as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So from 2008 until 2011, I was with BMW in Munich. Mm-hmm. And then I came back to Canada in 2011 to head up the MINI brand now. And that was a fantastic opportunity because, one of the great things about large companies that have multiple brands is you do get to work in different brands and see how things are done differently. Yeah, it's a great opportunity, I think, to expand your professional horizons.
So doing my maths, that's 9 years in the company. That's still quite new into a large company. What was the secret to you, rising through the ranks and finding yourself, leading a part of it in quite a short period of time? And you're quite young by then, right?
Yeah, I was in my early 30s. Look, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you do a great job. I was also fortunate in that when I started at BMW Group Canada, there happened to be a fair number of senior managers working there who went on to do good things in the company. That helped me develop my network fairly quickly. Yeah, I think in a lot of these companies, it's partially about doing a great job, and that's sort of a prerequisite. Once you have that, it certainly helps to know the right people.
Yeah, of course. Because this is quite a passion of mine. I didn't realize the value of networking until I was a bit older. And I think you don't realize it until people you work with start leaving or you leave a job. When did you realize how powerful network could be?
It was probably when I took on the MINI role. I think you could have looked at my experience at that time and said, and you probably could have made a case against me taking that job based on what you saw on paper. But again, I had one or two people who I think had a lot of faith in my capabilities, not just what I had already done. Trusted me to take on a bigger responsibility, and I think we're keen to see me grow into the role.
You actually had some supporters.
I had some supporters, which helps.
But it's interesting. You still got to do a good job.
Absolutely.
So some people say it's who you know, but I think it's who knows what you know, right? Because if you don't do a good job, that's bad for their reputation as well.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Nice. So how was the culture difference going from a German, long-term German company to one that was German-owned but with started in the UK? What was MINI like by comparison?
Well, MINI, it was a fantastic experience. I mean, in total, I spent close to 11 years with working on the MINI brand. When I started with the brand in Canada, I think what I noticed was that the biggest cultural difference was not necessarily that it had, it was a British brand, it had great British heritage and so on, as opposed to a German brand, German company, but rather the fact that MINI was a small brand within a big group. And that created a very different environment. And I think when you have a smaller group, everyone tends to wear multiple hats. It's much easier to make quick decisions. You tend to be able to put some of the politics aside much more easily. And
you don't have to please as many people, do you?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely still do need to, but it's, I mean, I'll give you a great example. If you wanted to get something done, you would have far fewer people that you would need to align with in advance. And that made for a very dynamic environment.
Yeah.
And at the time, of course, Mini was growing like crazy. Had just come off a hugely successful relaunch.
Well, that's right, because it's a really unique example where a company's been sold, relaunched, rebranded, and you've got to tie in with the legacy that people remember while saying that, hey, we actually still need to make good modern cars. So you must have been seeing the cutting edge of that, were you?
What was exciting about it at the time was that the way Mini was reintroduced, let's say under the BMW Group umbrella. It was in a way that was very different than anything the industry had seen. Since then, it's been copied. Certain pieces have been copied. The general approach to marketing, the style of marketing, has been copied quite a lot. But at the time, it was all brand new. And so this really, sort of cheeky approach, a very different visual identity in all the advertising. And back then, everything, black backgrounds, a lot of bright colors, and a lot of very creative marketing initiatives. I don't know if you remember some of the advertising back then where you'd have fiberglass minis stuck on the side of buildings. There was a lot of product placement at the time. The Italian Job, of course, was...
Yeah, of course, I remember that. That was a classic.
The most famous example. Yeah. It was a really, I think, fun time for anyone working on the brand. And that really didn't change for a long, long time. And since then, there have been some adjustments in how marketing is done for the Mini brands. But I think the brand's always done a great job of staying relevant for a modern audience, while still keeping that connection to the incredible heritage that it had.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, it's a really interesting time to talk because the BMW facelift, which is enormous, the Neue Klasse is coming soon, isn't it? And it's going to really surprise people. Tell me about some of the history of that. Where's that come from and what are the plans? When are we going to see them on the street?
It'll be 2026 before we see them really on the streets down here. But you will see more and more news about the Neue Klasse come out in the second half of 2025. But do you know where the name Neue Klasse came from?
Tell me.
So the Neue Klasse, the original Neue Klasse, was the range of products that came out in it's really the early 60s.
Yeah.
And this was at a time when the BMW Group really had to make some dramatic changes in order to survive. It had just been, the Quandt family had just come in to invest in BMW, thereby allowing BMW to remain an independent company. And it was really in a bit of a crisis. And the Neue Klasse at the time was a new range of products that ultimately helped BMW out of the crisis and set BMW on its growth path. And so that name has now been borrowed for this for the new Neue Klasse, because it sets it's really
sets some expectations.
It sets expectations, and it's symbolic of what this new product range will do, which is completely change, modernize the product lineup to make it really future-proof and to make the company future-proof, given all the challenges around the world and all the emissions regulations and the drive towards towards ever greater sustainability.
Yeah, great. So it goes beyond a look, a facelift, does it? Is it deeply structural in the company?
It's a really new way of thinking of product, and of course the design will be eye catching and quite different. But the product range will be very much driven by sustainability, with a lot of recycled parts and materials being used. Of course, a massive step in our electrification strategy. But then also this topic of circularity, so that the car can easily be recycled at the end of its life, and then heavily digitalized, making it, let's say, fit for what customers today and customers in the next 10, 15 years will need and want from their
It's
cars.
another part of sustainability, isn't it? Which is to say, if you buy a car today, we can actually update it based on not only the market and the expectations, but your needs. You know, if you're older and if you've got mobility issues, you might need your car to be updated in some way, and that becomes possible, I guess, with a new approach to it, as opposed to you get what you get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, but I think the Neue Klasse is I think it'll be a great example of how BMW thinks of sustainability, and sustainability at the group has a long history, and we've been a leader within the automotive industry when it comes to sustainability topics for a long time. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the first BMW electric car was built for the 1972 Olympics.
The Munich Olympics, exactly. Yeah. People possibly forget that BMW's got one of the longest experiences, but it seems to tie in with a theme of actually trying things, because it might not work. And I know that there was a plank of lead acid batteries, but it worked for the Olympics to get people round and reduce the smog issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you learn from that, right? Well, so we're in a new environment now where you can put a battery in that will take a car for 500 kilometers. I was incredibly fortunate last Christmas. BMW lent me the i5 M60, which is a stunning car.
Yeah.
And when you go into it, and I went in with no expectations, new car, I knew, 5 Series quality, but that completely changed my view on what electric cars can do.
Yeah.
Because I just plugged it. I travelled around the car. I had a road trip, and I just trickle charged it a couple of places. I never even had to use a fast charger, and it was brilliant. And I always got more range than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of exciting electric products available these days, and BMW Group, also in New Zealand, I think has really been one of the leaders in electrifying the premium segment, but also just making sure that customers have a wide range of products to choose from. So
range is important, isn't it? Because then the customer can express their needs. And when you look, there's roughly kind of 6 different, drivetrains that you can have, and offering several of them means that the customers get to choose as opposed to shoehorning them, which is
it's funny, this idea of we refer to it as technology openness. I mean, that's a core part of our strategy right now, and actually has been for several years. But if you think back 3-4 years ago, brands that were not committing to 100% electric, before 2030, were heavily criticized, and BMW Group was one of the brands that was heavily, or BMW was one of the brands that was criticized for that. And now I think we're seeing that, the proof is in the pudding. Look, it's actually a wonderful thing to have choice. You can't force customers to choose, or you can't force them into one particular product before they're ready.
It's moving from dogmatic to pragmatic, exactly. I think it's easy for a small, call them boutique manufacturer who only do one thing. I think it's easy for them to say, oh, you should do this or you should do that, because they don't have to serve the whole market. But BMW is in virtually every market in the world. And you cater, you don't deal with kind of more the mass market, but it's high mid-market to the very top across the brands, and mid-market probably with the Mini. But you have to give people choice. And I look at that, even Mini, which is a smaller range. There's choice in the powertrains. I drove the John Cooper Works car just recently, and that was just a bundle of fun.
Yeah.
And you could say, it's got an old engine, but it points the way, because then you can get the hybrid one. And that's the thing, is having responsibility across the market to serve all of your customers, not just the teeny tiny segment you picked out.
Well, the interesting thing is that these topics aren't mutually exclusive. We offer technology openness. We offer a range drivetrain choices. But because we have great electric cars, we do see actually still a strong uptake of electric. At the same time, we continue to fine tune and optimize all our combustion engines. We've got a large range of plug-in hybrid vehicles, and altogether, this adds up to a situation where we're always able to meet our CO2 obligations, and we're always able to continuously improve our fleet averages as well.
And you're taking a progressive approach. And I think you mentioned before when you said when you're in the very large brand, you have to meet a lot of needs, and it's in Mini, you don't have to meet the needs of people who want really large limousines, an i7 or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's around the customer actually figuring in the plan, because you know what, the customer pays us all. Without the customer, we're nothing.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
No, very good. Well, this is an interesting thing. You're talking about efficiency, and even with the internal combustion. I mean, we're driving. This is a 3-litre diesel, but you would not know. It doesn't sound like people imagine diesel sound. It sounds, at the moment we've got it on eco mode, so it hardly sounds like anything at all, and it turns off when it needs to. But we put it on sport, and it's got that raughty exhaust sound that you like, and it's fun, and it's surprisingly potent car. You don't really need anything more than this. But you used to need a 5-litre V8 to get this kind of performance.
Yeah, that's right.
And now you can get something. And I'm looking at the range here, and we've got almost 1,050 kilometres, and I've been driving it for a day, so it's pretty extraordinary. Okay, so you've been with the company for some time. What's your first memory of cars that what turned you onto cars when you saw it as a career, as a passion? What's your first memory there?
I actually never saw cars as a career until I saw that job posting.
Really?
But of course, I always loved cars, and so I actually grew up in Munich. So I lived there from age 3 until 18, and my father bought his first BMW even before I was born from a used car lot in the Netherlands. And the story that he always told was that he loved driving, and he went in and was looking at all these brands, and he told the salesperson that he loved driving, and the salesperson guided him towards a BMW and said, "Take this for a test drive," which he did, and he ended up buying it, and it was a 2002.
Right,
and
that's a classic car.
That's a real classic.
I hope he kept it.
Unfortunately, not. No. I still give him a hard time about that every now and then, but he absolutely loved the way it drove, and then that basically led to him being a BMW customer for life. So I remember growing up living in Munich, and our family holidays would be driving around to the mountains or to the lakes, and sitting in the back of his 3 Series or 5 Series at the time. And so I think when you grow up with something like that, it creates a strong tie to the brand. And of course, that was one of the things that I loved about joining the company in 2002.
Yeah, it's because there's a family connection to it. Yeah. And so was he a BMW man? Once he'd had one, he didn't want to go back? Is that
he didn't go back?
Right, wow.
He's never gone back.
Right. And so what was your first car?
Well, my first car was not nearly as exciting. It was, I think I bought it in 1999 or 2000.
Yeah.
In Canada, it was a 1996 Saturn SL1, I think it was.
Right. Saturn's not a brand you get here, is it?
It's not a brand.
Who owned that brand?
I think it was a GM brand, if I'm not mistaken.
It's gone now, isn't it?
It's no longer around. And I remember at the time, some of the ads for the car, they were proud of their the doors and the sheet metal had this ability to sort of bounce back, so you could kick it and it would pop back out. I imagine at some point damage would be done, but
classic Ferrari.
Look at that. So that was sort of I think the extent of their differentiation. It was not the most exciting car.
Well, the US has the US and North America has a mid-market range that we never see, do we?
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
all
that's
of
right.
those. It's kind of the tourist equivalent and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But New Zealand's too kind of passionate about cars. Tell me about the car culture, and you were back and forth between Germany and Canada, were you?
Yeah.
And so what's the car culture in Canada like?
You have in the big cities, you've got a lot of automotive enthusiasts who love all the same brands that we all love. The car market is very much driven by practicality. So you'd have pickup trucks were often the best selling vehicles in the industry.
The one car that isn't in the BMW range.
The one car that isn't in the BMW range, yeah, but and of course, Canada, just like New Zealand, has really over the last probably 20 years made a massive shift towards SUVs. And you can imagine this was one of my pain points when I worked on the Mini brand in Canada in 2011. Canadians like, generally speaking, large cars and cars with all-wheel drive. And
big distances, and it's always winter.
Well, it's not always winter, but you always need to be ready for winter.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they love large vehicles and all-wheel drive. And of course, at the time when I was running Mini in Canada, we had neither of those. But that was just part of our challenge.
So it was very much you were selling to the city car market, were you?
Yeah, Mini was a very urban brand in Canada, which I think it is in many places.
What else have you owned? What else has kept you entertained over the years?
Well, I've always, having spent 20 years with the BMW Group, I'm heavily influenced by our own products.
I bet.
I would say if I had to choose one product that I would buy, if I could, from the BMW Group over that time, it might be an E46 M3.
Right. Yeah, it's a real favorite, isn't it?
It
3
was
litre.
just,
Was that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just such a beautiful car. It had this great driver orientation in the cockpit, a spectacularly good driver's car.
So many of them found their way into racing as well. So
Yeah.
I've done a bunch of, Targa racing,
Yeah.
on-road rally, close the roads.
Yeah.
It's a favourite car.
Yeah.
People find them, and it did that thing. Prices, they get to a certain level now, they're just going up again. So if you're watching this and if you can find one, you should buy it because it'll be worth more tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely love that car. And actually, it's funny you mentioned you're asking about the Canadian car market. Canada and New Zealand have one really important thing in common, which is both countries love their M cars.
Yeah.
And so in Canada, we had a pretty high, so a pretty large percentage of our sales were M. And New Zealand is actually the number one.
It's number one.
It's the
what
number
is
one
the
market in the world.
percentage of M? Is it a quarter or something like that? Did I hear?
So approximately 11 or 12% of our vehicles are M vehicles, and then we have also our high performance cars. So they're M vehicles, but they don't go quite as far as the.
So this is M badged, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's not an M5 or
exactly. And if you combine those two categories, then close to 30%.
Yeah, wow.
Of our sales are M branded.
Yeah,
and that makes us it gives us the highest share in the world, which is
it's New Zealand for you, isn't it?
It is New Zealand for you, and it's also a wonderful thing to be able to use to poke fun at other markets.
No, it's great. Well, we've done a little bit of a drive where I thought we go into town, which we did because a lot of people who drive these cars end up driving there along the waterfront on this stunning day. And now we're kind of driving back through some of the areas where you've probably got a few customers around this kind of area. I'm sure we'll see a few. It's been really interesting to see BMW progress as a brand in New Zealand because when I was young, BMW was it was very rare for people to have BMWs. I don't think they were represented. I think it was Jerry Clayton. There was one place that sold BMWs, and it was kind of European car whispered in hushed tones, and there was a few BMWs and a few other ones around. It was all Japanese and English. So my my parents, well, they had a whole series of minis, and then they had a maxi, English again, and then yeah, but for so long, and all of my first cars were Japanese because there was no second-hand market to speak of.
Yeah.
And then the brand steadily built up. I would say this car, this X5, is one of the ones that made BMW like you always consider a BMW because this meets so many people's, check boxes. It does so many things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, again, I've only had it for 24 hours, but it's really, really impressive. It's brought that 5 Series refinement to the X5, I think, which is impressive. You barely know you're in an SUV when you're inside here, apart from the headroom.
Yeah, it's. I think the fact that it is such a good all-rounder makes it very popular. I mean, it's everything you need it to do: towing, storage capacity,
it's 3.5 ton towing, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's huge. That's usually just the top of the range for any brand. Do you see people taking these cars, for the hardcore off-road? Are people going to risk a car that's pretty doing that because it can handle it and it can tow?
I'm not sure a lot of customers would do that, but it's certainly capable of doing.
It's certainly capable, yeah.
Yeah, we had in Spartanburg where the car's built. They've got a great off-road track that they can use to demonstrate the off-road capabilities and so on. And it is extremely impressive. And you got to think a lot of the technology today is fairly commonplace, but the X5 at the time when it was first launched, the E53 in 1999, we actually benefited quite a lot from the relationship with Rover.
Right. Yeah.
And,
well, that was their experience, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so the X5 was able to launch with a lot of the technologies that the Range Rover had at the time.
Now, BMW's got a long history in motorsport. Have you been involved in that at all? Just watching them or competing at all?
I haven't competed. I've watched quite a lot, though. Back in the F1 days, we, every year we'd have all sorts of activities around the Formula One race in Montreal.
Well, you've supplied engines to a few teams. Sauber, I think that was BMW branded, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And quite a few others.
Williams,
that's right. And then you put the engine in the McLaren F1.
That's right.
Which was a absolute stunner and still is like one of the most valuable cars that you can possibly get. Your dad didn't know one of those, did he?
No, he didn't.
No, it wasn't a BMW, really.
No, so I definitely enjoyed being involved in Formula One activities back when BMW was in that. Got to some races.
Oh, wonderful.
The other one was with Mini. And
right.
I remember 2017 or 2018 when the Mini GP2 was introduced, which is a high-performance version of the three-door hatchback.
Yeah.
And that was first unveiled and shown at the 24 Hours of the Nürburgring, and was subsequently included in the race and so on. And that was quite an experience, getting to the Nürburgring and seeing 300,000 people camped around the track to watch the races for the weekend. It's fantastic.
On the 24-hour, is that the full long track?
Yes. Yeah.
Right, 27 kilometres or something.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a bit of a dream of mine, actually, is to, at some stage, I'm going to do a tour through Germany and visit some of the car manufacturers, and I'm going to take the Nürburgring taxi around.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I won't have my own car, so I'll get someone else to drive me. Oh, no, that's very good. Hey, so just back to your career for a moment. Are there a couple of things that you cite, so a couple of things that you credit with, what's powered you as you've gone through from, starting from being a graduate all the way up to leading a country? What are the things that you adhere to?
I think some of the things that have helped me, well, first of all, simply being mobile was a huge help. Being able to get experience, not just at headquarters, but also in some of the markets on the operational side of the business.
Yeah.
It just gives you a much more holistic understanding of how the industry works. Beyond that, I think, I think the ability to get along with people and build relationships. Again, if you assume that everyone has a reasonable level of intelligence and reasonable level of capability, it's the ability to navigate a company, to build on the relationships that you need to be able to maintain those strong relationships and so on. Those are the things that really make a difference.
Right.
And that's something that I've been able to do quite well.
Because it sounds in some ways like you came to the workforce just after 9/11, so timing was a little bit against you.
It was.
But have you noticed that people who started working then, as things recovered, the companies grow underneath them?
Yeah.
So you get almost accelerated, don't you? It works well if you're prepared to work hard, I think.
Yeah.
So what brings you to New Zealand? Was it an opportunity that came up with the company? How did that happen?
We were looking for another international experience that wasn't Canada, because after 15 years of transatlantic ping pong, we thought we'd
Is this your family?
Else. Yes. Yeah. The way it works, it's hard. I'd say your chances of securing a role are quite difficult if you only have one target.
Interesting. So that brings that flexibility in.
I went in and basically asked for international opportunities at a suitable management level in a wide range of markets, and I was on the list for quite a few different places. But New Zealand was the first one that came up, and with the MD role as well. It was one of those, we'll give you a week to think about it kind of thing. But we just said yes right away.
Yeah, great.
Because it ticked all the boxes of international experience, and what a fantastic country to be able to work in and experience.
Yeah, we're pretty used to having people come from all over the world. It's one of the real benefits, I think, in New Zealand is you end up with lots of exposure, whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
But you end up with lots of exposure to people from all over the world. It's I've always loved it.
A lot of my colleagues, like, congratulations for winning the BMW lottery. Actually, quite a few people said, enjoy your 3-year or 5-year vacation.
So has it lived up to their expectations?
It's definitely not been a vacation. I think a lot of people underestimate how much work small markets can be. And it's a little bit like what I mentioned with Mini earlier. Everyone in these organizations often wears multiple hats. And you need to pedal pretty hard in order to get the results. For people who are only used to working in the US or Germany and so on, it can be difficult for them to recognize that.
Yeah, but because essentially everything's a small business in New Zealand, isn't it?
Exactly.
There's really only a couple of big ones. So. But in a way that ties into some of the things that's made you successful, right? So flexibility, wearing many hats, and a lot of people don't realize when you're running a company, they think, oh, you're the person with all the answers. No, you've got a lot of questions. Yeah. It's having the questions, having the people that can answer them, and that's your job is to find them. So yeah, in many ways, it's tied into some success for you for that. Most of the time we've been driving, I've had all the assistance functions on, so I can literally let go, and it's going to take care of. I won't, of course, but it's doing the driving for me. Makes it very easy. Yeah, and concentrate on what you're saying. Doing the driving for me and the speed as well, because that makes it very easy. Are you a fan of those driver assistance functions? Do you use them, turn them on all the time, or what do you tend to do?
I am definitely a fan of them. I think all of these things have led to driving being just so much safer these days than 30, 40, 50 years ago. I'll admit that there are some that I find annoying at times, but I usually don't turn them off.
Yeah, I think I've driven a variety of cars, of course, and some are very intrusive, and it's like, I described one electric car as it's like having an aggressive teenager trying to do the steering. I mean, you can overpower them, but the automatic steering in it was pretty rough.
Yeah.
And very, very determined, and didn't see road workers, which was a little bit spooky. So when I adapted to them, and I told myself a little bit of a story, which is, like that first time that you use cruise control, you're like, wow, this is good. It's really like a super highly functional cruise control.
Yeah.
Because cruise control, when it manages the speed like this, I think that's one of the single biggest improvements in safety. It will brake for you. I had that actually coming to pick you up, someone pulled out in front of me and the seatbelt tightens, it beeps,
Yeah.
automatically brakes, and before I'd even seen the car do it, it was very impressive. And they kind of come together, right? Because the best thing is to avoid an accident. And if you're half a metre over or sitting in the middle of the lane instead of too far on that way and someone makes a mistake, then you're going to benefit even without knowing. Yeah, I've told myself that story, and now I always leave them on. And then I see how they do it. But I'm driving here, I'm doing the controls, and then if I just get a little bit more passive with my inputs, it takes over. But honestly, you barely notice it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty impressive what cars can do these days. It's
everyone's out for a drive. Like there's a lovely Mini and someone out in there, various sports cars, and anyone with the roof's got the roof down.
On a day like today on this road as well.
Oh yeah. I think this is because I'm drive like here to work. I think it's one of the best drives to work anywhere. It's got to be. No, it's great. So tell me, how long you been at BMW NZ?
I've been here for just over 2.5 years now.
Okay. Yeah, great. What do you think you'll be doing and, not the next job, but the one after that? Where do you see yourself?
I think, so I've learned from experience that unexpected things happen. And a lot of times what you think is your plan will then not turn out to be what you do. And in fact, I think pretty much every one of my roles was not one that I had expected.
That's really interesting. But you were alert to the opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly. They came, they were all a result of me going for a certain role or certain type of role. But just something else came up that seemed to fit at the time. So I'm not going to say where I think I'm going to be in 5 to 10 years because I think it's too hard to predict.
Yeah, that's a really interesting outlook. I like. So it's instead of a position, it's more a mindset of open to something which is going to be an enjoyable experience for you, right?
I'd like to be in roles that give me a seat at the table. That can mean a lot of different things, but I think there are, even just within the BMW group, there's so many exciting options in Germany, internationally, that it's very hard to narrow it down to just one or two different things. But of course, I'd like to have a seat at the table and be able to be involved in exciting decisions.
And what does that mean for you, a seat at the table? Just describe that.
Well, if I picture a boardroom, I'd like to be sitting around that boardroom when the key decisions are made. Have the ability to provide input, to debate, and ultimately have an influence. So I guess that's what I strive for. But that, as I said before, I think that can mean a whole range of different things.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. It actually in many ways takes some pressure off. I've seen a lot of people who they have to have, especially a CEO role, I have to have a CEO role by the age of 40 or whatever it might be, and almost regardless of the content of it. And I think your approach is interesting because you're saying, hey, there's all kinds of things that you can adapt to be alert to those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be careful not to chase. Titles don't equal job satisfaction at the end of the day.
No, that's right. Funnily enough, I did something entertaining about a month ago. I was an extra on a movie set.
Oh, yeah.
And it was minimum wage. I reckon it's the most fun I've had in 20 years. And it's such a good thing to break the correlation between money and fun because I earned the least I've earned ever. And I had a lot of fun. Have you ever been on a movie set?
Actually, well, not really a set. I've been in a studio.
Oh yeah,
and I've been in a movie.
Oh yeah,
but at least my voice was in a movie.
Oh wow, you're not like secretly famous, are you?
No, I'm definitely not.
Oh right.
No, this was when I was a child, living in Munich. And do you know the film The Never-Ending Story?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so they were making The Never-Ending Story 2, and I was at a film studio not too far from where I lived.
I totally remember that. That book was my favourite book when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So you recorded some vocals for that, did you?
Well, it's a German film, and it was filmed in German, and so they needed children who could speak native English, and for the English version, for the dubbed version. And so
fascinating.
Myself and my sister and a couple of friends were invited in, and we had to say a few things. And
recorded in the studio.
We got, a small amount of money, which at the time felt like a huge amount of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was pretty exciting.
Well, what I found most importantly is the small amount of money almost didn't care, because they fed you, they had a barista making coffee all the time. It's always good food, great people to chat, and you have a little bit of fun on the set and with all that. And it was an overall very positive experience, and I just had to keep telling myself, minimum wage, maximum fun.
Yeah.
That's right. So there really isn't a correlation there. And I know a lot of people who run their own companies and they love it, but there's a cost to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well. Yeah.
What do you think of New Zealand and Canada in terms of cultural similarities? What do you see there?
I think that's one of the things that made it relatively easy for me to adapt when I got here. I think there's a very similar mindset between Canadians and Kiwis. I think even the relationship between Canada and New Zealand and the, let's say, nearby, much larger countries.
Yeah.
So the relationship between New Zealand and Australia, and
it's the little brother kind of thing, isn't it?
And Canada and the US, it's the little brother. And that comes with a lot of different things. But that is almost identical between the two countries.
Yeah.
And when you're in a situation where you work closely together with people from those countries, both when I was in Canada and now here in New Zealand, it helps to understand those, the feelings that people here might have about working with people across the Tasman.
It's interesting for negotiations, isn't it? Because when you can't just use brute force, you actually have to discuss things. And that's a classic thing for New Zealand. And, I know Canada as well has often played the role of getting people to the table, a phrase that you used, getting people to the table to talk. Because if it comes down to, might, then we're never going to win.
Yeah.
I mean, New Zealand and Canada, if we're embroiled in some battle, we bet, I'll tell you what, let's just sort this out over coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Warned us there. There you go.
Putting systems to the
test.
Yeah,
I was definitely trying.
Yeah.
No, actually, I was looking at that McLaren that just drove past because I've driven that one.
So we have, at the end of the day, it's a relatively small team for the work that needs to be done.
But it's sales focused though, is it?
So my team is, really two larger departments, sales, of course, but also after sales, or we refer to it as customer support.
Yeah.
A handful of other people on the finance, HR, a little bit of marketing here. We work closely with the marketing team in Australia as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And then our 10
do you specify dealers. Product out of here as well for the market?
We do. Yeah.
You do, right?
Yeah. When it comes to product, we work closely with Australia as well, but of course the two markets are not identical, and so try to be as similar as we can be. We're as different as we need to be based on the local market.
Yeah, right. So you'll work together if you can, but you're realistic about it as well.
Oh, of course. I mean, working together, the end goal is a business result.
Yeah.
And if you can achieve that by working together, then that's great.
Yeah, great.
But if you need to do something a little bit different, then of course we will.
I always come through here because this is one of the curviest, windiest roads in Auckland, and an opportunity to push the sports button. You have to be very cautious with your speed, but it's always nice to come through there. And again, it's just it's such an effortless car to drive, isn't it? Looking forward, the Neue Klasse, is that the big that's the big thing coming for the brand, and how's that going to be handled in New Zealand? Is it going to be very noisy, or is it just going to sneak onto showroom floors?
We'll make sure that everyone who needs to know about it knows about it.
Yeah,
and this will be consistent around the world. Really, it'll be a major new launch for the BMW Group, and it will be here in New Zealand, of course, as well.
I interviewed Stella Clark, who worked on the colour changing.
Yeah.
That was a great opportunity. She's really interesting. She's very driven by technical challenge, and she showed. That's one of the first times I saw the cars was what the work they've done with the very early pre-production models there. But fascinating to see. So is that technology, this colour changing technology, is Is that going to be hitting the showroom sometime soon?
It might be a little while before we see it in the showrooms.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of potential for that.
Mm.
And I think we'll see that technology spread quite quickly in all sorts of different uses, certainly in concept vehicles. I think probably the most likely place we'll see it in vehicles in the near term, or let's say midterm, would be in sort of some high-end customization
Right. Yeah.
type of things, BMW individual and so
That's
on.
a good place to start, isn't it? I'd imagine you'd be all set to you get an example and you do a bit of a showcase around different countries and let people see at events, what this is about, because they see this cool technology, but really they're immersed in the brand, aren't they?
Yeah, no, it's still a story is a great one. It's always fascinating to get a glimpse behind the scenes in the engineering world because the number of people working in research and development, trying to find ways to develop new technologies, to innovate. It's fascinating stuff. And
a lot of photos of the R&D team actually sitting on the floor, like wiring stuff up and testing it by pouring water on it. Because cars are living in a very extreme environment. They get hot, they get cold, they're driven everywhere at speed. They have to not fall apart. And so you can't just slap an e-reader on the outside of a car, of course.
No, that's right.
You've got to engineer it for the environment.
Yeah.
Again, BMW, even though under the hood it's actually been a leader in many ways, like electric cars, for it to leap ahead with what's doing with EVs, colour, it's almost like it's a really new thing for BMW to do, to really get attention like that. It's easy for other companies to go ahead and, get their brand seen by splashing out like that. But when you're such a large manufacturer, you're going to be called to account, aren't you?
That's true, but I also think these days, with everything that's happening in the car industry, you need to be innovative, and you can't rely on things that you've done for the last 30, 40, 50 years.
No, that's right.
You need to evolve. You need to bring out new products. You need to push the envelope a little bit and be part of the group that's really sort of changing the car industry, as opposed to being a laggard. I think BMW does that quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. But still putting out quality cars, and I think that's the thing. We've seen a few gimmicks on cars, but you can't do that when you're selling millions of units.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Once you think of a brand, you see them all around, but we've had BMWs in front of us and beside us and behind us almost the whole trip. It's quite funny. Again, it's a more understated brand, but you realise the volume's really out there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now that's the next one. Now that underpins some of the MINI models as well, doesn't it? The chassis and the platform for that, I think.
Yeah. The new Countryman and the new X1 definitely share components, but it's amazing how different they feel. I mean, every MINI you drive, even the Countryman, feels the way a MINI should and drives like a go-kart. And I think that's pretty impressive how they do that, despite the fact that, of course, you share components here and there.
But there's an underlying competence that you're aware of. And I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and he said his son was just learning to drive. He saw a perfect car from which was a MINI. His son was like, so he took his son for a drive. And he said, I'm just going to show you a little bit about what this car can do. And his son was pretty wide-eyed and immediately bought the car. Because underneath it feels like a MINI, but it's a little BMW racing car under there, isn't it? Which is pretty exciting. Now I have to go around the block here, don't I?
Yeah.
Awesome. I will do that. No, well, thank you very much. It's been
thank you.
It's been great to have the discussion and learn a bit about you and the opportunity to drive in this car, of course. Thank you for that. I can drop you straight off to the door.
Yeah, that's perfect.
How's
Very
that?
convenient.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Adam.
Tim. Take care.
Bye.